Bits and Bones. It's Slady V, and I know it's the middle of March already, but I'm here with my February reading wrap-up. I know in January I was kind of killing it and I was really excited, but the momentum went on a bit of a down slope when I had to start investing more time in other creative endeavors instead of taking more time out of my day to read. Although I am trying to keep up as much as I can. Like, I'm not going to read less than one thing a month, and when March gets here, you'll see that I also killed it again, and I've got a lot more graphic novels to share. One that I'm pretty excited about. Like, I really liked all of the ones that I've read in March so far, so I have a lot of positive things to say. But yeah, unfortunately in February, all I read were 3 things. One I mentioned in my January reading wrap-up, which was The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. I finished. And I also read One by One by Ruth Ware, which was my first Ruth Ware book and a enjoyable thriller. And I know it's kind of probably cheating a little bit, but I also read Little White Duck, which is a children's book, but which I chose for a very specific reason that I will get into in a second. So, The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. I gave it a 2.5 out of 5 stars, which means that it was just mediocre. I don't think that I found it so mediocre simply because I expect more from Neil Gaiman. I think that it had a lot to do with the fact that I didn't read comic books as a child, and this was more geared towards how children want to read comic books. The Graveyard Book is about a boy named Bod, which is short for Nobody. His family is brutally murdered by a mysterious man, but as a toddler he manages to wander off into a graveyard. A bunch of spirits and a vampire, presumably a vampire, decide to take him in and protect him in the graveyard from the evil man. And throughout the graphic novel, we go through several adventures with Bod as he grows up. Not too much. I don't think he goes over the age of 10, as he sort of explores and tries to understand this fantastical world. And we as viewers get to learn about it too. This is only the first book in the series, so I think it's totally fine that he didn't actually grow up or much really happens. But that's also why it didn't get a very good rating from me. Every single chapter is its own little capsule adventure. None of them do so much character development that you feel like you couldn't have missed one in between and then read the next one. Because Bod himself is only a child, and he doesn't have many defining characteristics besides being a child. I found him pretty boring, to be honest. There were a couple times when I considered just not finishing the book, but I did. And then I wrote an article about why I did, because it was very interesting. As much as I've hit the point of willingness to finally DNF something, this was a prime opportunity for me to do that for the first time, and I didn't. Because there was something intriguing about the Graveyard Books universe. Not about Bod, not about the stories themselves, but the universe that we got, like, the slightest glance into. I was more interested than what was actually happening in the graphic novel at all by what iteration Neil Gaiman made of ghouls and shapeshifters, and, like, how the fantastical, supernatural world worked outside of Bod and his story. I have never been so uninvested in a main character themselves. Well, I mean, I've read young adult books, but I have pretty much never been so uninvested in a main character and still found the will to finish a novel. And so if you're interested in the article that I wrote about it, it talks about the power of point of view and how if this hadn't been a graphic novel where I, as the viewer, was allowed to see the full landscape of the world outside of the narrative and likability of the main character, then I wouldn't have read it. And it really shows, like, how powerful the medium in which you write your story or convey your story is. One by One by Ruth Ware was a book that was lent to me from a friend at work. We exchanged, and I gave her Sharp Objects, and, well, I mean, obviously she loved it. I've heard about Ruth Ware on BookTube multiple times, and I thought it was about time that I finally tried one out. One by One is a murder mystery up on a ski resort mountain after an avalanche where suspiciously characters keep getting picked off, and we don't exactly know why, although there is a lot of high tension and business scheming going on that could give any of the characters enough motive to want to do such heinous acts. I gave One by One a 4 out of 5 because I had a really easy time reading it. I would always sit down, go through like several chapters, and it didn't feel like anything. It wasn't tedious, and it was fun to read. I wanted to know who the killer was. In that regard, it wasn't completely perfect. I wasn't on the edge of my seat, but I did want to know what happened. So that's a solid 4 out of 5 stars for me, which means it was entirely above average. However, I do have 2 small complaints. One, and this is spoilers, because if you want to read it, just skip to the next chapter part of this video so I don't ruin it for you. It's a good book. You should pick it up if you like murder mysteries. So one was that the group of our main characters are all connected by a app called Snooping something. You snoop and you snoopscribe to people and whatever. Basically, it's an app that just lets you listen in time to something that somebody else is listening to, which is, I mean, I don't get it. I'm sure other people would love doing that, sure. But at the start of every chapter, we are divided between 2 main storytellers or protagonists, and at the beginning of every chapter, it has their name and their snoopscribers or whatever. And honestly, I thought it was going to become a lot more relevant to the story, the fact that this bit of metadata or information could change at any moment. And one part of the plot was semi-linked, like it was linked to the fact that one of the characters got a very specific snoopscriber, but other than that, it really played no role in it at all. I don't think this is a terrible thing. I think it was just kind of a creative way to add that in and set it a little bit apart when you're giving people every new chapter. But even in that, there was one chapter where they messed up because there's the character Erin, and she has the exact same snoopscriber counts from basically the beginning when she makes the account until the end of the book, where things change because resolution, and obviously she's going to move on. But within that time, things are happening within a couple days, and there's no reason for it to change. But I think the editor messed up because they mixed the 2 characters' Snoop scores together. Erin's was at a constant 5 and 10 for that whole block of the novel. Like, say this was the whole novel. For this whole block, she had the same stats, and for one chapter, they just kind of messed it up. I mean, it's an easy oversight, I guess, but at the same time, it's just kind of like, oh, come on. And my second complaint was just a personal preference, because one of the main characters that we are getting the story from turned out to be the serial killer. And as much as I can go back and I can look at the ways that she handled things, reacted to things, it all kinds of makes sense with the way that she reasoned and why she did everything. Her personality, you know, it lines up, but at the same time, if she was genuinely the serial killer, what would be going through her head would have been a little different. It would have exposed her for what she was doing a lot sooner. The only reason it didn't was because there was a certain amount of omittance, where the writer decided not to add in exactly what she's thinking. Even though after killing someone and hiding a key to their room in her pocket while everybody else is crowding around and freaking out, you'd think that she would be thinking like, oh god, what if they notice, what if they suspect me? Because she's a very anxious person. There's like, if you create a character that's very thoughtful and observant, somebody that is constantly reflecting on their own circumstances and has a high amount of anxiety, they would constantly be thinking about the things that they've done and going over whether they're safe, whether people know, whether, like, what's the next step. And all of that is completely omitted because obviously that would completely give away the surprise twist that it was her all along. And I just think, like, I don't love it when writers do that. Like, I wasn't mad about this one, but in general, when that happens, it's a bit of a disappointment, because it's like, the only reason I didn't know it was her was because you didn't have her thinking and reacting the ways that she would have been to my knowledge as a reader, in time when she should have. Get what I'm saying? And the last book, the kids book that I read, was called Little White Duck, A Childhood in China. And it's literally a non-fiction biographical retelling and showing of stories and situations that the author went through while living in China in a certain era. And the reason I picked up this children's book is because I wanted to get a little more of a historical glimpse into that time. And the best way to do that is to get the information directly from the source. It's not like I was studying it or anything, I was just vaguely interested. It looked like it would give me some new interesting takes on an era, a history, a culture that I don't know that much about. And it was really enjoyable. It was a little bit, it was fun seeing some of the very clear differences between what I've experienced and what she experienced, not just in the time period difference between us, but also the culture between us. And the ending of it and the tie-in to the name of it itself was really, like, I just found it very beautiful. It didn't have a very specific message, it just gave you facts. This is how it was, this is what I experienced. There's no right or wrong way to feel about it, and you can just take the information in and learn. Just learn from it. I think all of us should probably pick up children's books about things that we don't entirely understand in other cultures more often, so we can just generally widen our scope and understanding of other people's situations. So it was pretty fascinating, and it was very cute. It was very short, honestly. I wanted it to be longer, but what are you gonna do? So I also gave that a 4 out of 5 stars, because as a children's book, I thought that not only is it enjoyable to children, although a little bit specific, and they might not quite understand like why things are happening the way they are. The book takes place just after the rule of one child was introduced in China, so families could only willingly produce one child. But her sister and her had already been born, or the mother was pregnant when the rule was introduced, so there was nothing that they could quite do about it. But then she had to live in a world where they were only accommodating for one child, so she couldn't go to school while her sister did. She had to find something else to do. She had to pick up other tasks and chores to fill her day, and it was just very, very insightful. There was no, like, right or wrong answer in the narrative. There was no, like, oh, I hated that the world was like this, or I had to go through blank, or I thought. It was a very neutral portrait of the time that she spent as a child there and what she had to go through, and it was fun, it was cute, the style was very consistent and really fit the theme of the book. And if you want to pick up a children's book that is historically informational and entertaining, I would recommend this one. You can knock it off in about less than a half an hour, I'm sure, and get a little bit more cultural context and historical relevant information for yourself in the process. So yeah, that was my very short 3-book February wrap-up. I'm so sorry I don't have more for you, but in March I definitely will. I've got so many graphic novels already knocked off that you don't have to worry, and I can't wait to talk to you about them. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next wrap-up. Bye!